Yeah, welcome to the new edition of New Book, New Chat. Welcome to Professor Rama Bijapurkar and welcome to Deepali Nair. We expect to have an amazing session to understand India's consumption story. The book we are going to talk about today is called Lilliput Land: How Small is Driving India's Mega Consumption Story. Uh, Thank you to both of you to have agreed to spend some time here, and warm welcome to the audience as well. And we had pretty good registration numbers. I'm sure that's converted into attendance. Uh, I'm going to just introduce Deepali, and Deepali is going to introduce Rama. Uh, Deepali is the group CMO at CK Birla Group. Uh, she served as CMO at IBM in India and South Asia. She runs a very, very exciting and interesting podcast, audio podcast. She just clarified. It's called Being CEO with Deepali Nair. So do check that out. I'm sure there's lots to learn from there. Um, Deepali's experience is varied that it's quite interesting. That she has had stints in advertising, banking, insurance, IT sector, and I'm sure we all are going to enjoy this session. Over to Deepal.
Thank you, Benedict. And today's hero is Rama. She is, of course, he called you professor, but you are a sought after advisor, teacher, researcher, and I think in this era, an independent director on India Inc.'s boards. You are an author, Rama, of widely acclaimed books, and I'm going to list them out later. Rama, you have mentioned on your website that your work brings market focus and consumer insight to business strategy and provides a people lens to understand India's economy better. And I think your latest book absolutely does that. The present boards on which you serve are Mahindra and Mahindra Financial Services, Cummins India, Apollo Hospitals, Gokuldas Exports, and Sun Pharma. And I know the past list is also very illustrious and runs into many different, sentences. So I'm not going there. I think the other interesting thing is that you've been on the governing council of IIM Ahmedabad. You teach there, and you're an alum. You are an alum from there. In fact, we were just discussing that you passed out in 1977. Your previous work experience, of course, is employment with McKinsey, with Marg, which is now called Nielsen, with Mode, which is now called TNS India, and of course, you've run your own consulting practice from 2000. I don't know how you produce the books that you produce. And I don't remember which year was the first book that you published, but here's a list. Lilliput Land, which we are discussing today. We are like that only, understanding the logic of consumer India. The third one is A Never Before World, tracking the evolution of consumer India, and Customer in the Boardroom, crafting customer-based business strategy. So, Rama, you're a prolific author. Lots of your articles are on your website, ramabijapurkar.com. I'm an avid fan. Both from the perspective of the fact that you bring data to our lives, which is the marketers and the salespeople and business strategy lives. And second, you are a women leader, which is and who has built a career completely on her own terms. So thank you, for joining us today over here.
Well, thank you, Benedict and Deepali. And thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I think I'm going to just savor it for the rest of the year. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Rama. So, Rama, my first question to you, and of course, we can discuss a lot that you've written on in the book on numbers and the summaries, and we will get there. And hopefully, I think the audience will also post questions about that. But I think the first 2-3 questions that I want to talk to you about is a liftoff of the understanding that you have of the Indian consumer, what you've written in the book, but more importantly, your interaction with the boards. So my first question: you are on the boards and you speak to global and Indian CEOs. You have spoken about in the book that people only want to hear one version of the truth because it's just simpler for them to, I think, assimilate. So what is your message to future CEOs, to entrepreneurs who are, getting into running big businesses, to people who are going to run big businesses in future? How should you interpret data? How should you interpret Indian consumer? And what should they read? And who should they listen to?
Who should they listen to is always a good question in this day and age, right?
Yes.
Um, I think the message is let's embrace our demographics as a consumer market, as a country, as a consumer economy. Let's stop waiting for this ugly duckling to become the beautiful swan. When we hit that level of per capita income, then consumption will take off. As I've said often before, that's a lot of hogwash because at any level of income, consumers have needs, wants, and markets exist. You may not be able to serve that market, but that doesn't mean the market only happens after a particular stage. So then you hear so embrace the macro and the micro. Fifth largest economy, 126 or something in terms of per capita income, large but not rich. Hugely digitally savvy. The entire country has learned digital in a short period of time, but number of graduates a very small proportion. So understand that we're a valuable ugly duckling, embrace it. I call it data integrity. I mean, it is receive it with integrity. Don't receive it with only the bits that you want to hear. And listen to everyone. As the first chapter of my book says, God is in the detail. So listen to the right economists, listen to the left economists, listen to India's shining, it's the fastest growing economy in the world. And also listen to GDP numbers are not okay. It doesn't feel like 7 or 7.5. Because when you start reading why they all have their points of view, and I grant today we have more ideology than analysis, but once you have read and listened to everybody, then develop your own point of view would be my point. Your India may be very different from my India. The India of the Lamborghini is definitely different from the India of Hindustan Lever. So I think what is relevant to your target India, I think we have to be ready to embrace plurality. As I've said in my book, don't search for the singular narrative. There are many Indias, there are many narratives, and just embrace it. Figure out which one is yours. As I said in my first book, someone asked an Irishman about whether trousers were singular or plural, and he said singular on top and plural underneath. And whoever I quoted in the first book, I can't remember who it was now, says that India is like the dhoti. It's plural on top and it's got many, many, many folds underneath. So that is what I would say.
There was a small part in my question that I asked you, what should people be reading? I mean, you've already answered saying they should listen to everyone, but what should they be reading? Any tips there? Especially the COO who is a CEO in making, or the young sign of promoter, who will take over the business tomorrow. What should they be reading?
Yeah, I think I'm using listening and reading interchangeably. If you have access to all the analyst reports, read all of them because that's a stock market perspective. If you have and you do look at all the EPW left economists ideas for India, that kind of stuff. I'm not saying they're all left, but that's a more economic view. And I think read. I make the difference between concept and context, and I think you should read everything conceptually. My favorite book is Lafley's Play to Win at one level. Another one is Delivering Profitable Value. So read all the conceptual stuff you can lay your hands on, the best of the world. Read about blue oceans, and I think it will. But on the other hand, the context is also important, and for context, read. I don't care whether it's a podcast, it's Audible, it's an omni-channel world. Just read, hear, soak in.
Yeah. I think there's a very good tip there, which is at a conceptual level, read the books or listen to the books. And I think the marketeers sometimes do not get to read the analyst reports. And I think it's extremely important for them to do so. So thank you for that tip, Rama. Rama, another similar question that comes to my mind, they all seek your counsel, whether it's a startup world, the unicorns, the private equity investment professionals, VC firms, Indian CEOs of MNC firms in India. Tell us what's common among us them and what is different, among us them. And, the question comes to my mind because I think if you look at the anecdotal growth stories in the last 5-6 years, the VC firms, investment professionals, have had a role to play in the growth of the unicorns. They sit on the boards of the consumer tech companies. Are they doing a great job of guiding execution? That's where my question's coming from.
Right. I also want to tell you, because I give tough love and I'm an iconoclast, I don't get a lot of, I mean, people do come to me and seek advice and disappear as quickly as they come. I'm not always the most favorite advisor. But as one of my early clients came back and said to me, he said, you told us 10 ways in which we will make mistakes, and we're happy to tell you we made mistakes, exactly those 10 ways. So that also happens. As far as, I wouldn't be able to comment on the specific VCs and the specific consumer tech firms, not that you're asking me to either, but I'm saying I'm not privy to that. But having sat on a large number of boards and listened to a lot of VCs speak, I think, of course, they do a good job of, that's their job, right? They will push towards execution, they will nudge, they will push, they will bludgeon. That is what they do. The question is, push towards what? And I've always asked them the question of the difference between value and valuation.
Yes.
I also upset a lot of my stock market friends by quoting a headline from a very old ET article that said the Sensex is driven by neither sense nor sex. So we say, okay, let's start looking at where the meat is. So if you're building for valuation, you will follow one set of strategies, you will execute towards those. If you're building for value with a longer term, people tell me, of course, value leads to valuation. But I think we know that in the longer term, it's like saying if you take a large enough sample, you will always get it right? But in the shorter term, value and valuation can diverge quite significantly. So, for example, so do they do a good job? Yes. Is their objective the objective that my favorite strategy guru Kenichi Omai says? The heart of strategy is about creating value for the consumer, not about beating the competitor.
Yes.
And avoiding the competitive battle altogether. I don't think we're there. For example, the victory that we call on brands that have been around for 6 months, 8 months, if you applied the theory of the brand, none of them, even the older ones have no business to be called brands. And you're a practitioner of brands, so you know that very well, right? If a brand has all the things a brand is supposed to have, the functionality, the functional benefits, the emotional benefits, the relationships, the personality, the shorthand chip of who am I, why buy me, a lot of brands don't work. And so we see that one so-called brand is on the up and up, especially in fashion and other businesses. And then suddenly there's another brand, so-called brand, that comes and eats its lunch. And then there's a third brand that comes and eats the lunch of the second brand. So if you are caught with the baby at the wrong time, then you have a problem. And I think VCs have a very good handle on what that is. Is it the consumer religion, the consumer-based business strategy religion, as I understand it? No. For example, I'm hearing a lot of received wisdom, and here again, I'm probably going to, I don't know, sound, what's the word? The discordant note. There is received wisdom today that a lot of D2C brands seem to be saying, and VCs, that, oh, you can't build brands digitally. I'm saying, hello, in the world over, a lot of brands have been built digitally. So when you have a particular point of view that is serving an objective which you enshrine into marketing wisdom of the day, which you then pass on to everybody in the community, which then becomes more received wisdom, that's when I start to worry.
Yes.
So, for example, you say, oh, the only way to build brands is not digitally, but is omni-channel. And I'm thinking, yeah, sure. When you go physical, every second country, every second city you go to will give you more revenue, obviously. So you can play the city revenue game. I call it the Star Wars strategy, going where no one else is gone. And so you go to, it's not that big companies don't do it, they do, but at least they're transparent about what they do.
Yes.
I've sat on boards where we've had to clean up holes in the balance sheet at the end of this whole merry-go-round. But so that's what it is. But if you truly said, yes, it's possible to build brands digitally. Yes, it costs a shitload of money, which we don't want to spend at this point in time. Yes, I have to upfront all that and then wait for the rewards to come. And therefore, I want to do this. You will follow one direction. If you say, I want to build digitally, I need physical in order to be able to act as a force multiplier for digital, you will do something else.
Yes.
So I think that's really where I am. I think the very smart and bright people. I think the objectives, for example, in big companies, as you know, many of us do at boards have discussions on whether we want the PE investor on the board or not on the board, only
Yes.
because you want everybody's values to align. That said, obviously, I have met many VCs who are exceptions to the rules. So let me do a safe harbor for myself.
Okay, thank you. But like you said that everybody's doing it, so we should be doing it. I've seen that over the years, that oh, you're an insurance company, why don't you have a Facebook page? And I've had to explain that to people as to why it doesn't make sense for us. And similarly, another time, a CEO came and listened to some unicorn and startup professional said, oh, why don't we have an app? So there is this whole thing of wanting to do things because others are doing it and how you want to build the business. And you rightfully said it's about what you want to do, and therefore what are the steps that you take to do the business strategy. Thank you for clarifying that. Now on to the book, and a question on some of the stuff that you've written in the book. One of the very interesting analysis that you've done is the top 20% rich, and then the next 20% rich, in India, or the people who are the haves, and very very clearly you've said that, look, when you want to address the top 40, which is 20 plus 20, your strategy needs to be different. Maybe the go to market needs to be different because they live in different places, they consume different things, right? Now, to me, when I was reading this, I said this is almost like running two companies or two businesses. The back end of manufacturing, etc., may be the same, let's say, or the product management or the service industry may be the same, but the front go to market has to be thought of like two different segments. What's your reaction? Is my interpretation correct? You want to comment on this?
Yes, I want to comment on it. Your interpretations are always correct. I'm just going to elaborate a little more. Um, First, let's talk about running two companies. Many years ago, 100 years ago, beyond what I can remember, when I was a young market researcher, I spent a year as a full-time consultant in Hindustan Lever looking at a competitor analysis of Nirma,
Hmm.
because Nirma at that time was, you know,
Yes.
10 times larger than the brand that this had. And in that process, I think what we understood was that what is now called a business model, in those days, I didn't even have the vocabulary for it, but it was a completely different way of doing business. And it was a
Yeah.
completely different way to keep the cost positions down. It was a completely different distribution. In one case, you couldn't sneeze without the company's permission. And the second case, you just dumped stock at Mulji Jetha, and not Mulji, at Masjid Bandar Market and said, go for it. So that's the formulations were different, stuff was different. So that's when I think the penny dropped for them, and then they spent the next many years creating the low cost business model that is now etched in history.
Yes.
Are they different companies? Yes, because if you are trying to achieve the least cost position, then landscaping on your fancy factories allocated to the product won't work. You have to do third party manufacturing. At that time, everyone was horrified. The chairman at that time, I think Dr. Ashok Ganguly, used to say that Toyota just puts the finishing touches in its factory and assembles. The parts are made elsewhere. What is your problem? So you have to learn to do things differently. You may not sit in back pay reclamation. You may have to sit in Goregaon, which was not cool in those days. Okay, today South Bombay is not cool.
Yeah.
And I think that when you had to and you had to really run them because the business economics were completely different. So, in fact, I also want to say that sometimes the go to market is actually more similar. For example, digital savvy and both the rich and the poor is about the same. The gadgets, even the cost of gadgets is maybe a little bit different, but what they do is pretty much the same. The access models may be the same, but maybe it's the product and the configuration and the purpose that's different. So if you're in financial services, as I've shown in the book, the occupation of the next 20 is different from the first 20. So you've got to redesign your services. Or the idea of what is utility? What do I need as a productivity tool if I am in the top 20% versus the next 20%? Where I live, what I do, how I live is different. So sometimes it's actually more the business design. But in this book, Customer in the Boardroom, which is based on my teaching at IIM Ahmedabad, it's a course called Customer-Based Business Strategy. We peg it around choose the value, build and configure your business to deliver the value and signal the value. So the value is different because what the consumer wants is different, then everything else is different. So a lot of our students say to us that, oh, am I supposed to run 5 different value delivery systems in the company? And the answer is you have to, and your genius is in minimizing the cost of complexity of doing that, in seeing what is common and what is different. Is it the front end common, the back end common? Is it the accounting software that's common? I don't know. And I think that's really what people are paid to do. Find the
Yes.
commonality, find the difference, minimize the cost of complexity. Try and optimize the entire system while keeping the differences down. A lot
Yeah.
of people tell me that's theory, but honestly, if you don't do it, then you end up chalte chalte ye bhi, wo bhi, you end up with some wonderful middle ground that neither satisfies the top nor the bottom.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that has clearly happened in the space of marketing and advertising, taking off from what you said just now, is that, gone are the days when we went and did the UNE study, customer segment, found a common insight, and produced one film, which served everybody on that unique insight. And, it was your big idea that you kind of launched. And in fact, I was just addressing all the CHROs at CK Birla Group of 15 different businesses that we have, and I was talking to them and I said, today everything has to sit together as long as it is not divergent or speak contrast stuff. The employee stories, the testimonials, that one big ad, your digital banners for sales, they all sit together and people get to see it. As long as it fits into this boundary conditions of the brand manifesto, it works. So I think the way we think about, I call it go to market loosely, but you're right, it's about minimizing the cost of complexity and still living with that complexity and saying it ain't going to be the same model that worked earlier. So yes.
Yeah, that said, I also want to say that I think we did a much better job of finding insights and building brands pre 1991 when the product was not the hero of the story. And I do actually marvel at finding that one insight. Could be freshness in tea, which applies to Assam tea in Assam and whatever Darjeeling tea in Darjeeling and dust tea in the south, and it's different products with the same proposition. It's a little bit of a stroke of genius, right? I do yearn for that, but you're right. In a more fragmented world, and in fact, I call it the orchestra score. I mean, if it's whatever Mozart or whatever it is that is your chosen orchestra score, I mean, don't go off and do Strauss or the
Yes.
sing the same rag, everybody please. And you can improvise as much as you like, but the rules of the rag are the rules of the rag. Which is why I don't envy jobs like yours where you have to keep everybody in the same boat and on message on the brand, because that's a
Yes.
lot of herding cats to do. And allocating money to each of them.
Yes, yes, and thank you for acknowledging that. But having said that, Rama, sorry, I know I'm interviewing you, but I want to make that comment. I think the richness of the consumer insight and consumer data came home to us a lot more because we spent time with the consumer physically. Today a lot more transactional data is available because of the digital transactions. So the whole habit of going into the market and spending time with the trade, with the consumer, has actually reduced amongst company professionals, call them, whatever, be it the management, be it the marketeers, be it who make decisions. So I think at some level we understand consumer lesser.
Yeah, you don't think the trolling the entire social media space is a good enough substitute.
Yes.
I know it's not quite it, but I met an absolutely wonderful person who does just that. She's based in Bangalore. Call her out. Her name is Anandita, and the kind of stuff she produced by way of presentation, I was like, okay, let's put a different lens and see if you produce more stuff around this, because it was absolutely wonderful. But yeah, I guess we don't actually understand how people use this stuff, right? We don't go into homes and we don't understand how it's exactly done. Yeah, if you don't see women cooking, how are you going to do a cooking brand? And if you don't understand parents are frowning when you leave the house. How can you do a fashion brand with a dress that's slit up to the thigh? I completely agree with you.
Thank you. Okay, Rama, I'm going to, I have the book right here and I made notes. One of the interesting things that you said, and people know about it, but I think you've quoted as a developed country, is not a place where the poor have cars. It's where the rich take public transport. So what's your estimate? Will that ever happen in India?
In the next part of the book, I talk about the COVID vaccination, and it actually
Yes,
happened, right?
yes,
I mean,
yes, you did.
nobody could
You did
beat
a
the
very good.
system. And honestly, people who did beat the system were so stuck because they didn't get certificates. I mean, even if you manage, and I'm anecdotally told, I don't know if it's true or not.
Yes.
But so I think when we then, if the NEET exam had not got such a bad name, I guess common entrance exams. Actually, I'm doing an anthropological study on young India with an anthropologist professor from IIT Madras, and and the amount of competitive examining that these people want to do, not quite the CAT SAT kind of stuff, but the RBI exam, the nursing exam, the some other exam. Maybe it is a leveler, but we are an unequal country. We are a diverse country, so I think we should live with it. But at least if I understand after the Delhi metro came, and I understand in Bangalore after all the traffic, more people are taking public transport. So it will happen in India. We're like that only for the wrong reason because we can't handle the weight of our cars. We might actually actually take the metro.
Yeah, and I do think that the metros and some the train system, the level and the quality is getting better. So yeah, it just might happen. Frankly, I think the other interesting observation that you've done in the book is India being digitally savvy, although despite their education, and therefore the whole learning quotient in India and so on and so forth. So I just want to give, so the first time that I used a voice note on WhatsApp was because my Maharaj told me to. He said,
Okay.
"दीदी हमको पढ़ना नहीं आता है, तो आप हमको voice note भेजिए, हम भी आपको voice note भेजेंगे." And this
Yes.
was many, many years ago. And I think that's a perfect example of what you also referred to. I'm reading from page 107, that watching the barely educated learn how to access digital goodies and the use of smartphones is a continuous reminder of learnability versus formal education. Where do you think this will take us? And I mean, the digital payments is a big surprise to the rest of the world of how we manage it, and these guys are using it. What will we leapfrog, therefore, according to you, in terms of consumer models or business models or markets?
We are. So, if I understand your question, will this widespread digital savviness and the fact that our central nervous system now is digital, right? It's not our road
Yes,
networks and so on and so forth.
yes, yes.
So that's why I am so excited about the new economy business models because in the past we were not able to manage performance that the consumer wanted, and we have monster consumers, as I said in the book, and the price the consumer could afford and the profit the manufacturer wanted, and that was like an impossible squaring of the circle. And we had to do a lot of physical innovation, and most companies didn't do it, couldn't do it, took too long. But now, actually, this has been cracked because digital models are enabling us to crash costs. I mean, imagine how much a KYC cost you in the past, how much a rural bank cost you, branch cost you in the past. So now you actually can aggregate small supply, aggregate small consumers to create a certain minimum scale, and you digitalize processes to crash costs. And hey presto, you can buy 1 rupee of gold and not pay a penalty as a consumer and as a supplier to make it work. Similarly, education and so on. So that is why I feel that this at last is the back to the future where we're going to leapfrog. Because
Hmm.
if you look at Swiggy and all those kinds of models, they're aggregating everybody, the chai wala, the pan wala, the chap on the street, the Maggie noodles wala, and they're all yoked together, which is why actually I call my book Lilliput Land, because it's small consumers, it's small suppliers. So it takes the we're like that only way, and then it yokes it all digitally, and hey, we can actually have whole new ways of doing it. People say to me, oh, there's no path to profitability. That's true. But hopefully that will happen soon.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but the point is that we have found new ways to do it, and there's no turning back from that. And we found ways to leapfrog from what we currently are to what we can be without fundamentally changing who we are.
Yes. No, and I mean, thank you for saying that, and also thank you for the last section of the book, which is all about the supply side. And I know that that's a model which is not fully developed. And you rightfully said just now that people say, where is the path to profit? But that will emerge. But a question in my mind when I was reading it, when it comes to aggregating what I call the service industry, the banks, the financial services, and even servicing the physical goods aspect of it, it's all fine. But I still feel that we will lag when it comes to actual distribution of the physical products that need to be consumed, and therefore that may not get aggregated. That may still be the mom and pop store model that will continue to evolve in India. So I mean, this is a dissonance in my mind, that service industry will get aggregated and there will be probably path to profit over there. But I think when it comes to physical distribution of manufactured goods, we may not achieve that. Uh, your
I'm, yeah, I'm not okay. Let me give you my thinking on it. Firstly, I think a lot of so-called products are going to become services. So if urban company does, please God, get its act together, manage to keep people, train them, scale them, we may. I'm looking forward to a day when I don't have to buy detergent and brushes and stuff like that. I hope someone can just come and do it for me. So
Hmm.
that's one part of it, is the servicization of everything, which I hope. But more than that, and you've had extensive experience in distribution. I think we have a very good physical distribution system. I
Yes,
mean, you can on your in those days on their Blackberries, CEOs of consumer goods companies got secondary sales data
yes,
by the time
yes.
the day was out, right?
Yeah. In fact, Marico, we at Marico used to be very proud because we got that before Unilever.
Oh, you did? Okay. My friend who was the MD of Britannia, she told me that she will get it by the end of the day. And I thought, oh, really? Is that a big deal? But it is obviously a very, very big deal when I
Yes.
speak to people from elsewhere. So I think that is done. I also know that because a lot of the unicorns as well and the general change in the logistics environment, I mean, today, if you actually talk to startups, they tell you how many pin codes. I keep telling them pin codes are not people, but anyway, the number of pin codes they send to. So, someone told me that she sold two pieces of a push up bra and some very, very ancient remote pin code. So, the
Yeah.
long tail is
Yes.
actually doing better with the digital. And you
Yes.
have startups who are actually going below the nose of the conventional distribution system. Hopefully, they will do well. People like Elastic Run and so on, who actually will help you go the last mile that much more. So I feel that we will actually be able to do it much, much, much more efficiently because we will get rid of all the conventional distribution nodes and inventory and so on and so forth. So we'll strip cost.
Hmm. So once again, I mean, I long ago worked for BPL Mobile when we launched the first mobile phone in India, and pages used to be a thing. And India pages never took off because the market, really leapfrogged. So similarly, I think there will be models. And in your book, you've written about the fact that MNCs want to come to India and look at one end of the market or want to hear one version of the truth. I just feel that even for future, when we are going to you've said we will add one more India in the next 10 years in terms of GDP, to the country. I hope I
Inshallah.
remember. Yeah,
Inshallah, we will.
yeah, yeah. So I feel that I think we will leapfrog some of the models that exist in the world. We will just do it differently.
Absolutely,
And,
we
and
will.
and when you said inshallah, I do have goosebumps because I mean I don't want us to be whatever. Okay, now I'm going to move on to some interesting questions. How many years has it taken you to write your books? What every book every 3 years?
Um, a year to actually write it, and maybe a year before that in the form of putting new ideas into every presentation I make so that they're market tested. But it takes about a year to write. It takes about, this one took about 4 or 5 months, but by the time we go through the edits and the publisher and this and that, it takes a year. No matter how much I try and crash it, it takes a year.
It takes a year. Any tips for wannabe authors, people from the business space, who have interesting ideas, who want to write? Any tips for them as to how should they go about doing it? By the way, I hope you know now there's a commercial model of people coming in saying we will help you write a book in 60 days, and they charge you for that.
Well, that's not a bad thing, actually. If you have thoughts to get out, let's take a leaf out of this multi-channel world. By the way, I read my own book for Audible. It was sheer torture. I discovered all the typos in the first edition and had to reprint with a cleaned up version. But I would say that in today's multimedia world, whatever medium works for you, build it. Like you have a podcast, if somebody else doesn't want to write the book but wants to do a blog and make that work, it is entirely possible to build brands and books digitally, then do it that way. If somebody else is going to write and you make sure your voice doesn't get lost in the process, then by all means do that. Whatever works. But as someone said, of his PhD advisor said to him, the best PhD is a done PhD. So the best book is a done book, right?
And yeah.
So,
But
yeah.
so
But I
Rama,
think also ideas and build it. I mean, don't sit down and say beginning to end at one shot, I'll do it. I mean, it's a process.
at a personal level, I admire you because that whole right brain thinking, left brain thinking is, of course, fantastic with numbers, but you also have the gift of the word. And I know that you've done your graduation in physics, and then you pass out of IIM Ahmedabad. How did you develop the love for the language and the expertise at it?
I don't know. I think I went to convent schools, and also when you come, sometimes you have to argue. I remember you telling me before this that your parents were not necessarily keen to send you far away. My father said to me, I would go to IIM Ahmedabad over his dead body. Later, of course, he came around. So when you've had to argue your way through life, I think you learn to argue. But also because I think I do read a lot. I read a lot of fiction. I love fiction.
Okay. And how many hours in a day do you read?
Oh gosh. Well, something, anything, online, offline, book, blog, somebody else's newspaper, would be maybe I don't know, 2 3. That's all. 2 3 hours,
2 3 hours.
maybe
That's a
more.
lot.
Airport tarmacs. I love delayed flights. I love airports. I love long flights. You just read and nobody disturbs
Yeah.
you.
Do you watch the OTT series?
Oh, absolutely. During the lockdown, there were people who said, "Oh, I wrote 2 books," and they asked me, "What did you do?" And I say, "I have a postdoc in Netflix and Amazon Prime." So yeah, I watch. In fact, I've just watched the series Panchayat over the last 2 days, and before that, of course, I rewatched the whole Big Bang Theory from beginning to end all over again. So yeah, I'm a junkie.
Oh, okay. And do you read the newspapers physically still?
No, actually, I for a while stopped reading newspapers because I think if there's anything important in the world, one of my WhatsApp groups will debate it. So I just wait. I still get 2 newspapers because my newspaper wala wants them, and because it's good to have all newspapers in the house.
Yes.
Um, but I mostly read them online, but I don't read them every day regularly. I read them, when I have time. I'll say latest news about, I don't know, about defense
Focus reading.
sector or Rahul Gandhi or Catherine, Princess of Wales, and there it comes up.
Sure. How do you? I know you teach the course at IIM Ahmedabad, but apart from meeting the brightest minds at IIM Ahmedabad, how do you stay in touch with younger people and what they're doing?
My doors are open for anybody and everybody wants to come and see me. A lot of my students do come and talk sometimes. I recently spent a wonderful 2 days in Bangalore, and a friend of mine had invited a bunch of them to dinner, so we had a good time. I meet VCs all the time. VCs sometimes send me people and say, friends, and say, friend VCs, and say, I don't know if he's making sense to you. He seems to be making sense to me. Will you talk to him?
Oh,
And
nice.
so I think if you keep your doors open and your phone lines open, people will come and talk to you. So that's good. I read the Ken, of course.
Okay,
And
you do. Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, now going back to the books that you've written, and I mean this book in particular, which is the order if somebody's not read your books at all? Which is the order in which you want them to read your books?
Customer in the Boardroom is a different book. I would want them that's a more conceptual book. Otherwise, I would say start with the latest and go backwards to see whether. So the latest tells you what is, and if you go backwards, it tells you how we've evolved over time.
Wonderful.
Uh,
Yeah.
if you must, otherwise buy them, don't read them. That's fine too.
No, 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 no. Why not? You must read them. Raman, there's a question that somebody's asked. This has come from the audience. To what extent are you influenced by Professor C.K. Prahlad, especially his book Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid? And was he the first one to speak about the power of the small consumer?
Well, C.K. Prahlad is definitely a huge inspiration for me on many counts. As I've said, he wrote the foreword to my first book, We're Like That Only. And there he said something that I wish I had said, but that's why he's CK. And it was listen to the logic of consumer India from within. So I think that was a very powerful thing. The other thing he said to me is write for yourself, for your own clarity. Don't write for other people. And so
Wow.
when you start writing, then questions like why should I bother with small India? Why am I saying do the customer thing when companies are still doing well? Does insight matter? So that's certainly very powerful. He did. In fact, at one time, I remember at that time, he said that imagine if the Angadia and somebody else were linked up via the internet, you could get a DHL beater. And at that time, I thought, yeah, that sounds like an academic idea. But he was very prescient, and I think he was well before. He was very prescient in what was going to come. So yes, he did. He did talk about networks and stuff like that. And I think that his whole he's one of my role models because he sat where he was and he gave the world path-breaking concepts after concepts. Whether it's fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, which some people would rather call progress at the base of the pyramid, whatever you call it. Or it's the idea of core competence, or the idea of competing for the future, or the idea of harnessing the small. I think he said it all, and he said it well before it came to
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah, you just now also spoke in his context also about the consumer India, and I think in your book also you've referred to that and said that people ask me to make a presentation on the Indian consumer, and I instead go and talk to them about consumer India. I think for the audience listening today also, can you just explain that, please?
Right. The Indian consumer suggests that there is a unique and singular consumer with a singular view. And I think it's about driving towards homogeneity. But as I've often said, we thought in the 1990s after liberalization that India would homogenize, but actually it's heterogenized. And the
Yes.
internet, actually, I've written a piece called BharatNet. The internet has helped us heterogenize even further. We're more parochial, more language, more my thing, not somebody else, more echo chambers. Our politics has got fragmented. The income range is much wider. So I think there are many types of consumers in India. And that's why I call the whole consumer India. So when people say, can you tell us about the changing Indian consumer? I'm sitting down and thinking, which consumer? Oh my God, that's terrifying. So if you call it consumer India, I think you are accepting the fact that it's a heterogeneous bunch. There doesn't have to be one answer. And on the one hand, you can look for commonalities and similarities. And on the other hand, you can also choose to embrace differences depending on what your strategy is. And if you look at e-commerce or Amazon in particular, it enables you to be who you are. I mean, if you've always grown up eating black rice in the Northeast and you're living in Bangalore, you can still get that black rice and live in Bangalore.
Yes. Yeah, I think it allows us, to be in that sense. Okay, just a question that came to my mind. I've always seen you wearing saris. How many saris in your wardrobe?
Not that many. I give away, though I have to tell you, when you ask me how do I keep abreast of trends, it's getting harder and harder and harder to give away saris I'm tired of because nobody's wearing saris. So I have to really hunt. And more interestingly, none of my household help wants those saris because they're getting cheaper, better, nicer saris from China, which don't require maintenance. So there
Yes.
is no giveaway for market for silks and cottons. And so I still try and give away that many. So I don't have that many at any point in time. I wish my daughter would wear saris, but I think if she did, she would want a completely different set from what I do. So I have one cupboard full, but I'm constantly looking for places to give away sarees.
Oh, okay.
Young women who would like sarees, and every one of them. And you know what's interesting is that because there are few people wearing sarees, but people like to buy sarees. I'm getting a lot of sarees gifted to me. So
Yes. Uh, okay, so there's another question that's come in from the audience, which is what would be your advice to business school marketing professors on how should they get their students to become more perceptive about customer consumer? How to
uh,
build that skill? How to build that skill in students about being, perceptive about consumers?
okay, so if you're running a course, so for example, let's say if you're running a business strategy course, which is customer based, what we do is just kill anybody who brings the supply side in presentations. Or for example, when many years ago I ran along with my teacher who I teach with a course, a market research course that I'm on the but it's quite a popular course, and there we would say one page submission of your project, and the one page would be one line submission of your project title. It would be to understand demographic profile of credit card users, and we would return it with one line in red saying with a view to doing what, and
Yeah.
people would hate us for it. Okay, and
Yes.
then we would have something called there are so big devices. We had devices where you started with business problem and went all the way through to variables you required to solve that problem, and if you didn't get that sequence right, you got killed. So I would say discourage. I do it in companies as well. Sometimes marketing departments make me presentations where you don't hear the word consumer. It's
Yes.
market share. Okay, we also tell students that if you use the word segment for products, we will kill you. It's product categories and consumer segments, and if you want an F, mix them up. So I think you
Yes.
just have to constantly keep it on the radar, and if they want to do supply side, that's perfect. Your first 5 slides can be supply side, but then you better take all that and translate it to the consumer side.
Yeah, yeah. And if I may add from myself, from my side, because I have taught at SP Jain for over 2 decades. I think it's also about the discipline about from the whole faculty that even when they're teaching a sales course and when they're getting these integrated projects done, they must ask the question saying, okay, is it based on consumer insight? Is it what consumer truth? Is the suggestion or strategy that is being presented? What is it based on? I think
Well,
just
that's a
that
tougher
awareness.
one. That's a tougher one because there are as many faculty as there are consumers, and many genuinely do not come from that school. In fact,
Mm.
we set up CDBS because there was another very successful course called CCCS, Core Competence and Competitive Strategy. And we
Okay.
thought, hey, where's the consumer there? But you can see that that's relevant to learn too. So we
Yes.
decided to call their CCCS, we called our CBBS. It was a joke for a while, and then the
Yeah.
joke faded. But yeah, I think. But what we do sometimes is pick up from other courses and say, what
Yes.
did you learn there? And then say,
Yeah.
oh, you learned from Michael Porter. Okay, let's talk about Michael Porter and the consumer. How do you see the linkage between the two? And then people start struggling with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you do it. Don't make them do it. You lose your friends.
Sometime back when we were talking about what you were reading, you referred to something called Blue Ocean. I'm assuming you're talking about the book Blue Ocean
Yes,
Strategy.
yes, yes, yes. By Kim.
Is that one? Yeah. Is that one of your favorite books?
I'm seeing in the startup, yes, yes, it is. No, it's not my the favorite, but I'm noticing that in the entire startup world today, a lot of the unicorns are blue ocean. Actually, they just don't know
Yes.
that it's blue ocean, or they don't use the word blue ocean.
Yeah.
But that's what is really exciting me. Many of them are actually blue ocean.
Yes, they are.
And yeah, and I think if I ran a course on Blue Ocean, I would just have a project that says analyze, which is what I did for my book, analyze the top 100 unicorns and, figure out which are Blue Ocean or not, and, why is it the way it is. But the Blue Ocean strategy book, I think there is the whole consumer angle to it that has to come in, which we also teach because it is a little bit from the supply side for the consumers. So we're saying build it together by adding the consumer leg to it. But
Yeah.
it's a brilliant book.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to be close to wrapping up. And one of the things that I wanted your comment on was that on one side, when we read your book, we realize that, look, the macro data is not in place. you are struggling, it's not matching up, and there are various data sources, and you write about that in your book. The other interesting thing on the other side that I see is that a lot of organizations, banks, credit card, companies, service industry, have tons and tons of transactional data. They don't do a good enough job of analyzing it, and actually serving tailored, customized offerings to the customer. I mean, I see that as clearly as true juxtapositions. There's a lot of emphasis on data scientists and analysts and things like those, but there's not enough analytics really being done. It's all just very cookie cutter still.
Yeah,
What's
you're
your
right. I think that's changing. I think when people have started seeing what all, for example, on credit appraisals, what all data fintechs have been able to put together for their credit appraisals, then the question gets asked in the boardroom that, hey, why don't you have that? There are a lot of data scientists, but also I'm seeing the reverse, which is recently someone was trying to build a particular lending business, and I said, "Can you have one person on your that data doesn't get you customers? First, you get the customers, then you get their data, then the data gets you more customers. So, can you have one person on your team who's seen a real life customer or who worked in a consumer goods company? So that it's not about mergers and acquisitions and data driving consumers. So, I think we're in a flux right now. I'm
okay?
seeing the transformations from a ringside view from boards, and I think we should do a better job. But unfortunately, the data people don't understand customer. The customer people don't
Yes.
like data. So it's more a cultural thing to make the two of them talk to each other and appreciate each other. And at the end of the day, it's always about people, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. And that brings, while you were talking, the question that came to my mind is, what is the future of market research agencies?
Uh, I think they will morph, and you're already seeing a lot of boutique consumer insight firms, a lot of boutique brand firms. I think the Nielsenization of research and the serialization of advertising, I've often said, has created a certain cookie cutter, large research kind of thing. I think there will be a lot of boutique, and so there will be 1,000 flowers that are blooming there, and we already are seeing that. And I think we should broaden the definition of market research and just call it consumer insight. And if you get that consumer insight by walking the streets, I mean, be my guest. Let's not put too fine a point on it. But I think we will see 1,000 flowers blooming. We're already seeing it.
Lovely. And unless there's an audience question that comes up, my last question to you is about on women leadership. There is a question that's come up. Indian CXOs were trained in Western management theory so far. Uh, what is India teaching the world now?
Well, India is teaching the world. I think first India had to teach the world that India was different. Then India had to teach the world that to win in India, we're different. But transporting, there are, of course, some examples of how India has transported its way of thinking to the world. But what my deepest desire would be to see a fantastic global management journal come out of one of the business schools in India, and that way we can also talk about what we know. Whereas today, even professors are rated on peer-reviewed journals and ABC category journals, and some of the stuff is not quite relevant. So I think maybe we should put a large size of prize onto the idea of creating a world-class journal that is emanating from India out. We're still someplace there. It's a little bit of both. It's
That's
not
an
fair
idea.
to follow zero, but yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, world-class journal from India, which covers what India is doing. Yeah, that's a great one. And Rama, the last question now. I think from the time that you started working, which was 77, I started working in 1993. I think women leaders and women's acceptance in business has come a long way. There's no doubt in my mind, but the progress is very slow, is my personal opinion. Even when I run the podcast, there aren't enough female CEOs that I can find to interview for my podcast. I used to be at IBM, and there weren't enough female CIOs that I could invite to a roundtable. There aren't enough factory heads who are women. there may be more women CHROs and maybe more women CMOs. I'm talking about, and there aren't enough women entrepreneurs, either. There are the role models, there are the poster child, poster children as I speak. But what do you think can be done or has not been done for more women leaders to emerge?
Part of the issue, I've always said that the battle is at home. So, we have to. It is, as we say of India, 21st century economy with an 18th century society. So maybe not quite 18th century, but I think there's got to be, and I think it's changing in slightly subliminal ways. I mean, for example, now there is a partnership model of marriage, which means that whichever one of us is getting the bigger bonus, the other will stay home. But I'm going to be the driving force behind that thing that you make. So is that a woman giving up or is it a woman seeking more power? I don't know. But it is an issue of a lot of it is family issues, and maybe there is something to definitions of success being different.
Yeah,
Maybe
sure.
maybe that's not the idea of heaven to run a company. I mean, I would die if I had to do a job like with structure running a company, and I would never have been able to manage my balancing act. So I
Yeah.
chose the alternate path, and along the way, my husband said, "Oh, you're taking the risks, you're having all the fun. Here I am stuck in this job," and I was like, I got there first.
Yeah. No, but you found your own niche, and we are so glad that you found it. Thank you, Rama, for the conversation today. For those who joined late, I think Rama's insights on what people should be reading, listening to everyone, reading analyst reports, I think those tips were great. Her comments on how to look at go to market for, let's say, the top 40% rich in India, and why it's not just go to market, but the point that she made about reducing the cost of complexity, I think is a very poignant one from my perspective. And I'm told that the organizers will mail and post excerpts of this conversation. So thank you, Rama. And from the bottom of my heart, I truly, truly enjoyed conversation with you. And keep writing and keep enlightening us.
Likewise, thank you very much. You are too kind, and they were great questions. And thank you, Benedict.
Thank you, Rama. Thank you, Deepali. That went very well. Terrific,
Thank you.
terrific session.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, thanks very much. And
Bye-bye.
guys, come by and see me when you're in Bombay. Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.